to the Wealth Worthy Podcast. I'm Trisha.
Hi, I'm Darian.
Thank you for joining us.
Today we're going to be talking about making life plans and how these plans will help you prepare during these trying times. My first question for you, Trisha, is what role does flexibility have in your planning?
I think, especially during these times, it's important for you to be open and flexible about what your options look like and how you approach a situation, particularly since you don't know what the outcomes are going to be. You don't know how the situation changes or fluctuates. So you really do have to approach all situations with some flexibility and be open to whatever is in store. But with that said, you still need to have as much of the concepts planned out and your visions planned out so that you have an idea of where you need to go. I think during these kinds of fluctuations, it's easy for people to lose course and not even make any progress against the goals that they had set. And so if you have a plan and it's diverted in any kind of way, you can still revisit that and say, like, okay, even though this situation has happened, this is still the goal. This is still what I'm working towards achieving. And that way you can still look forward to achieving those goals, right? Versus everything being up in arms and you're not able to continue on the path that you were seeking. What are your thoughts on it?
I think flexibility is important because it keeps you afloat. I know sometimes we can get into our own routines and to kind of doing things how we normally do it, but I think just being able to be flexible is good because it keeps you open to new opportunities as you still plan each day to go forward in whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah, and I mean, even when I think about the entire month of March, right, we knew at point that the coronavirus was becoming a serious situation. I don't think we were calling it a pandemic just at that point. But the reality is that we knew that there were increasing cases. There was a lot of fear in the markets. People weren't sure what direction things were going to going. And if you were in the mind frame of things are in flux, let me see how this can work in my favor or how I can use this as an opportunity, right? Then you probably would have been able to make money in the financial markets or at the very least be able to quickly make plans around what your next steps should be. And that's the key, just being able to act quickly. So if you have a plan in place and something diverts that, you can really take action much faster than somebody who doesn't have any plan at all.
My next question is, how should you change your career plans as the country changes each day, not knowing the outcome for the rest of the year?
Right. When you are unclear of the next course of action is, it's important for you to still maintain some idea of what your goals and purpose is. And that goes for everything that you're doing, right? That's along the same lines of the flexibility that we're talking about. But in terms of your career, this is the area where people are sometimes able to come out on top because you have a number of people who may enter and exit any given industry. And if you are deemed as the expert because you've been there longer or because you have the experience, then it could work in your advantage where now promotions may be an option for you. There may be different positions that you can work your way into, right? Just figuring out how to find right people to sponsor you into those roles. or finding the right voices that lead you to the decision makers around areas that you might be interested in. But when it comes to that career decision, if you know what you're interested in, you can really pull some levers to say, this might be a good time for me to push forward in this area, or like you could decide that you want to change your course altogether. But I know just the other side of it is, if you're working in a workspace and you're just trying to maintain your position, like this is the time too where people are just staying where they are if they can. Like there may not be tons of movement unless there's some downsizing or your business was forced to close during this time. But just being mindful of the opportunities if they exist, right? Because sometimes we are just so stuck in the course of doing everything the way that we usually do, and you might miss the fact that there's an opportunity to continue growing or putting yourself into a position that may be open, or a blind spot that the company might not be thinking of, right? Like just figuring out what makes the most sense for you. It's definitely key in these kinds of situations. Like how can you best position yourself for the next role, whether it's something similar to what you are doing now, or like if you are in the market looking for a new position, right, questioning whether or not you need to obtain new skills, or if you can use what you have and leverage that for a position that may be different than what you are currently. What are your thoughts on?
I think the time is now. I think, especially with how everything is going, I think everyone has a lot of leverage to be able to be on the creative side and kind of bring their full self to their job or to a company. And you just have to be open to new opportunities. Like we always say, it's good to always brush up on your skills and really just put yourself out there, because you never know where your career or where the journey is going to take you. So I would just say, just always be open to the next big thing, or even being able to create the next big thing yourself. It's always good.
Yeah, I think some of that is easier said than done, right? Because a number of people are out there trying to figure out what the next move is. And the key to it is really just figuring out who the key decision makers are and what kind of access you can have to those people. So if you have the skill, then really all you need is the network piece of it and a job opportunity that's available. If you don't have the skill, then you need to work on obtaining the skills that are necessary to at least get your foot in the door, and then still applying those concepts of finding the network and finding the right job opportunity. So those things all work in intertwining, like it all intertwines. So you really do have to constantly look at that balance. Like, is there an opportunity? Do I have the skill? And am I networked with the right people? So whatever you can do in those spaces can really help to move you along in any job opportunities that may come about.
My next question: how should you change your investment strategy if you're worried about losing money?
So when it comes to investing, we talked a little bit in the last episode about risk and just making sure that you are diversifying. I think during these times, it's easy for people to hear about all the companies that are reaching new highs and be ready to jump in because they're like, oh, people are making all this money off of this stock. Let me figure out how to jump in on that. And a lot of times when that happens, that means that a great deal of money has already been made, right? So whoever's telling you about these new highs likely already made their money off of that And so you do still have to be strategic about it to figure out whether or not you think that there will be some kind of dip in the market where it'll be more advantageous to you to jump in when you see that kind of dip versus buying it when it's at an all-time high. But I think the real deal around that strategy piece is just making sure that you are diversifying where you can. So a lot of what we've shared in conversations is just around different funds or ETFs that you can invest in that's the market, right? So if you're looking at specifically the S&P 500, then looking at ETFs like DOO or SPY are good options for you to completely mimic what's going on in those markets, where you can also be looking at specific ETFs for a sector. So if you're interested in technology, or if you're interested in the stocks that have been making the most movement in the market, then you can look at those opportunities as well, so that you're specifically targeting those things. So for Vanguard, they have VGT, which is their IT ETF, but there are a numbers of different ETFs that you can look at. And I stress the ETF piece because it's a cheaper way to get into the market, right? Like the fees are lower. You can buy them from an exchange the way that you would stock. But if you have the balances that might be required for some of the index funds, or if you don't have the balances and you don't want to pay the fees, right, there's some few ones on Fidelity that you might look into where they have like a total markets index. That one is VZROX. So just looking at those different opportunities for you to be active in the market, but you're not necessarily all in on one stock. Like, it's fine to jump in on some of these individual stocks that you see are having good momentum right now. They're making moves, they're hitting highs, they are close to or beating the expectations on the market, right? Like, you want to consider all of those areas before you put all your money into it. And then, of course, try not to buy when it's at the highest point, especially now, because we're in a space right now where people are still concerned about what the market's going to do. And we have a number of reasons why the market could very well make another dip, particularly when we think about just how long this coronavirus pandemic has been going on in the US, and the fact that we're seeing certain states have ramped up numbers when we're hoping that they'll be on a downward trend, right? But just knowing that things are still in flux related to the pandemic, knowing that we're already in a recession, and knowing that we're in an election year, right? Like, all of those things come to play. And I think as we start seeing more and more companies release their Q2 earnings reports and make their statements on how they feel the companies are performing, they will likely have some losses that they are having to explain. So I'm very sure that a lot of companies are going to be saying that they've missed targets because of this pandemic. And while some of that might be expected, the question is going to be whether or not it's worse or better than what we were initially thinking, or what the market has already been thinking. And with companies going bankrupt, you also have to consider that as well. Like, will they be able to rebound, or will they be in a situation where their business is completely closed by the end of this? So you really do have to just figure out what the market is doing in terms of the trends, right? So looking at different charts, looking at different articles, reading about their earnings, finding out as much as you can if you're looking at individual stocks, and if you're looking at broader indexes, just another consideration information of how do you feel the market is doing. So if you're tracing the S&P 500, you need to have some sense of how you think those 500 companies are going to perform, right? So we have an idea of the industries and the type of companies that are moving the market. So you really do want to pay attention to what those are, what industries we're looking at. And then, of course, if you are looking at specific sectors, same concepts, but now you're concerned about those specific areas. So technology is definitely a hot spot, and figuring out which facets of technology make the most sense to invest in is a great way for you to make some wise decisions around investing in that sense. But of course, other areas of investing are still very much relevant. I know a lot of people are gearing up to make their move on real estate as soon as they start seeing any kind of market response to what's been going on. And that may be a viable option, but you do want to weigh what that looks like and how you think that'll impact you. So like for us, we still have thoughts about or some investment in what's going on with Fundrise. So that's an easy way to invest in real estate without having to take the full burden of purchasing a property in full on your own, right? It's more of a crowdfunding kind of concept where you are a part owner in whatever the investments are that they have. So just looking at different avenues for you to dabble into these different investment opportunities without completely tying up all your funds, particularly when you don't know what happens next with your income, right? You don't want to be in a position where all your income is tied up and you're having to make tough decisions in areas that you shouldn't have to. Like, the goal is to never touch the money that you're putting aside for long-term investments. And the more that you can pay attention to that, the better, right? We need our money in there compounding as much as possible. Any thoughts on that?
I think you just have to be open to change and trust the process. Sometimes that's hard to do because I think we all want returns on our money like tomorrow. So I think you just have to just trust the process and being in for the long run. Like you said, you have to do your research and know what you're investing in. And sometimes you have to sell or either trade, whatever it is, and kind of take whatever you made off of that and reinvest it.
Right. Yeah, I think that knowing when to enter and exit is a huge part of it for sure. But if you're invested in these funds, it's easier for you to leave it alone because it's more of a broad-based fund than you investing in something individually, right? Like if you're invested in something that you see is on a downward trend, like we talk about airlines a lot, just in terms of the fact that we're not traveling as much as we used to. Right now, most people aren't traveling for leisure, and just knowing that that will probably have long-term lingering impacts on the behavior of everybody else, right? Like we're not all going to immediately want to hop on a plane while we're still searching for the vaccine for coronavirus. And even when the vaccine is available, I think people will still be skeptical about how they travel and who they're around. So, it definitely is putting a strain on that industry. And I think people are looking at it as an opportunity to quickly buy. But, if the company wasn't strong before this, you really do have to think twice about whether or not it makes sense to even dabble in that. And it might be something that you enter and then try to quickly get out of if you see kind of profit happening. Because some of these airline stocks, like you have to look at the high, and when when you see the high, you're like, okay, well, that's probably the maximum that I would get if this rebounds. So just be cautious and try to look for as many trends as possible. If there are questions about the trends that you should look out for, then we can certainly help to point you in the right direction. But, the goal is to not lose a ton of money if you can avoid it. Anything else that you would want to say to wrap this up?
I want to say thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Wealth Worthy. Have a great week. Stay blessed. And we will talk to you later.
Okay.
Bye.
Sounds good. Thanks. Bye.